It's a state which has terrible human rights abuses. And we have no guarantee that people being sent to Rwanda will be treated fairly and not be subjected to similar. And I suppose someone returned to Rwanda speaks out against the Paul Kagame, what's going to happen to them? So you can't be doing business with a state like Rwanda. Not this country. We should not be doing business with them. Well, the policy is not lawful as yet, because although in December 2022, the courts ruled that it was lawful, the courts have granted a leave to appeal that decision. So they're really trying to put the cart before the horse here. I think they're lining themselves up in the hope that the courts will decide that the policy is lawful, but that's not been decided as yet. So nobody's being removed to Rwanda until the courts are finished with this.
Of course. Can you just explain to our listeners then, why would people being deported to Rwanda face a real risk of serious and irreversible harm in Rwanda?
Well, if you've read any of the human rights reports on Rwanda, you'll know that Paul Kagame, the leader, the head of Rwanda, he has extrajudicial killings, he detains people unlawfully, arbitrary arrests. It's a state which has terrible human rights abuses. And we have no guarantee that people being sent to Rwanda will be treated fairly and not be subjected to similar. And I suppose someone returned to Rwanda speaks out against the Paul Kagame, what's going to happen to them? So you can't be doing business with a state like Rwanda. Not this country. We should not be doing business with them.
They are also, the other amendment is going to be, Ivon, that they are going to try to reintroduce more legal routes. They're going to commit to that, aren't they, within 6 months of the bill being passed. I presume you welcome that.
I do welcome that, but we should be accepting our fair share of the global asylum problem, much of it caused by Western interference in different countries. And if you look at the countries where the vast majority of asylum seekers are coming from, places like Syria, Iran, Yemen, we should be accepting 100,000, which is, if you look at per capita, at the moment we accept half of what Germany does per capita and size of population, and then France, we accept 7 in every 10,000, where Germany accepts 14. So we should be, taking on our fair share of asylum seekers around the world. And the government goes on and on about Ukraine and also Ukraine policy and Hong Kong policy, but these are not asylum seekers. These are not refugees.
Okay. I just want to go back to the initial point, because it was an interesting one, actually, and it's one that our audience are fairly raising. So Danny Kruger said that people, the British public, are fed up with London lawyers, presumably ones like you. And Chris in Sheffield has got in touch, and he said, I'm fed up of lefty lawyers. He's saying lefty lawyers. It's not like they will ever be affected by increased immigration given where they live, presumably meaning London. What would you say to Chris?
Well, I would say that it's not a London problem. I don't agree with that. Look, society is judged by the way that we protect the most vulnerable people in society. That's how we judge. And any state which has good moral values would protect people fleeing from persecution, terrible persecution, and they're coming for protection here. And instead of abiding by our responsibilities under our treaty obligations, under the Refugee Conventions, we're subcontracting that to a state like Rwanda with a terrible human rights record. Please, I think it's disgraceful, the whole Rwanda policy. We should consider the people coming to this country, we should consider their asylum seeker application. And if they fail, we should remove them.
But Ivon, I think that can be true. But I think the point that Chris was making was that a lot of these detention centres, etc., are not in places like London. They're in places like Kent, etc., and therefore people who live in those areas feel more affected by it in whatever way it is than people, for example, who might live in London and who work in the immigration lawyer business. Well,
look, the elephant in the room is, look, I don't see any homes for Afghanistani refugees. I don't see any homes for Yemenis refugees. We're quite happy to have homes for Ukrainians. But when it comes to brown people, we don't want them in our backyard. So please, I don't agree with such comments. And I don't want to say more than that. But let's be fair. Let's treat everyone fairly and equally. despite the color of their skin.